right, it's day 3 of the Global MedTech Regulatory Trends True Quality Summit series, and we have another amazing session lined up for you. If you missed the previous session, Navigating APAC Regulations, you can watch the recordings on demand. We're excited to have you join us for this presentation, Insights on the MedTech Regulatory and Clinical Environment in Israel. This session will run for 35 minutes with the 10 minutes allotted for questions. If you have questions that come up throughout the presentation, feel free to ask them in the chat in the right-hand side or in the Q&A. And then we will get those answered as many as we can. Presenting today is Adi Ikowicz. Adi was a former founder and CEO of Mdsap, a clinical and regulatory affairs consultancy firm that specializes in assisting companies to navigate through the international clinical and regulatory maze. With more than 25 years of experience specializing in developing company-tailored clinical and regulatory strategies, and helped many companies meet technical and regulatory demands for their products, guiding them through the specific technological requirements and best practices for the collection of clinical data. His previous experience includes managing clinical and regulatory affairs departments in both well-established and startup companies and preparing regulatory submissions to the EU, FDA, and other geographies. In addition, he has been performing internal and external audits since 1995. Until 2012, and for 4 years, he was a lecturer in the Biomedical Engineering Department of the University of Tel Aviv. And currently, Adi is a lecturer at the Oecd College of Engineering in Tel Aviv. Since Mdsap was acquired by Janae IQVIA, Adi was appointed to the Senior Principal Europe for IQVIA MedTech. And with that, I'll turn it over to Adi for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Brittany, and hello, everyone. Good day. Thank you also, Greenlight Guru, for being so kind and inviting me for this virtual event. It is quite a pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this magnificent event that was organized. So, as was mentioned, my name is Adi Ikowicz, and I'm Senior Principal at Metec Regulatory Solutions in Europe for IQVIA, of course. Europe includes the 27 member states of the European Union. It includes also the UK, Israel, and Turkey, and Switzerland. So this is the coverage of the countries that are under Europe, and I'm dealing mainly with the MedTech industry. So in the next 30-35 minutes, I'm going to talk about the regulatory and clinical environment in Israel. And practically, I will try to cover 5 topics. First of all, a few additional words about who are we and what we do, to understand a little bit more about the ecosystem in Israel, the healthcare and medical device system in Israel, the regulatory requirements, the market access, and finally, clinical trials performed in Israel. So a few more words about the group, the IQVIA group. So we are a multidisciplinary group of professionals dealing with regulatory, clinical affairs, and quality affairs with medical devices. We are covering practically most of the spectrum of the medical devices, including IVDs, in vitro diagnostic. So we are covering also active, non-active, drug device combinations, and active implantable devices. So we deal and we work with all kind and all type and all size of companies, from large companies to very tiny startup companies, one-man shows sometimes. So we understand very well the way that different companies at different size work, their constraints, their needs. And as part of us and most of us in the group, we have experienced by ourselves working in different companies. So these are we, this is the group, and specifically for Europe, we are working closely with the regulatory authorities, including the European or the EU notified bodies, dealing with developing strategies, regulatory strategies assessment, definition of product-related standards, periodical review of standards, gap analysis and impact analysis, due diligence activities, classification and pathways of products, DHF and DMR, evaluation, and also dealing with different previous directive and current regulations. We are also dealing with risk management consultation, including FMEA and FMECA, usability plans and reports, preparation of verification and validation plans and reports, and also performing audits, the first party, second party audits, including the plans and the execution and the reporting. We are also dealing with PMS, post-market surveillance and vigilance, and we are providing also ad hoc consultancy services and training. So this is me again. You will get the slide deck afterwards, so you will be able to read a little bit about my expertise, and my contact details will be in the last slide in this presentation. So you are welcome to contact me, and for any question or for anything that might be raised. So let's go directly to the essence of this presentation. So to be able to understand the regulatory and clinical environment in Israel, first of all, we need to know a few details, or to have some information about Israel itself. Sorry. Of Israel as a country. So let's start with the population of Israel, which is about 9 million inhabitants, more or less like in the United Arab Emirates or Austria. In terms of the size, you can see the size of the US, and this small dot is actually Israel, which is 73 times smaller than Israel. Israel more or less is in the size, is even smaller than New Jersey, actually. In terms of the GDP per capita, the International Monetary Fund published in October 2021 the figures of different countries. This year, 2021, Israel was ranked 19 in the list of GDP per capita, very close to Belgium and Germany. And it is expected that in 2022, there will be an increase of 4% in the GDP per capita. So, practically, and most of, I would say, the income of Israel comes from the high-tech industry. Israel is a member of the Oecd, which is the Organization of Advanced Countries. It is since 2010. And in 2015, The Economist made research and published a list of business environment ranking that you can see that Israel is placed or is ranked 20 among 195 countries in terms of doing business in the country, how easy is doing business in the country. So also this is something that can provide some information about the ecosystem in the country. In terms of investment in R&D, the government, the Israeli government invests 4.3% of its GDP in R&D, in research and development. Among it, 30% of this budget is dedicated or is devoted to life sciences, which is the segment that is more interesting us. There is even a specific ministry in the government. It's called the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, that this ministry support many companies, definitely and at least in the first stages, in the seed stages, but afterwards also when the company become more mature and already start to sell devices. So as you can see, even Israel is placed in the first place in the world in the percentage of investment, governmental investment in GDP. So the most investments that are done by the government are divided into three main fields: the medical and science segment, the software segment, and the telecommunication segment. Currently in Israel, there are 4,000 registered high-tech companies. And when I say registered, that means that there are many, many others that work from the basement and nobody knows about them. And it is estimated that there are about 2,000 more companies, high-tech companies that are non-registered, but they are still active. 500 companies among these 4,000 with annual revenue exceeding of 20 million US dollars. 600 new startups every year, over 400 Israeli subsidiaries or headquarters in the US, and over 80 Fortune 500 corporations conduct research and development in Israel. And among them, we can find, of course, Amazon, Google, Medtronic, Johnson & Johnson, GE, and many others. In terms of the workforce, Israel has the highest number of scientists per capita. More than 25% of the total workforce hold a university degree, and among this number, 12% hold an advanced degree, which is a master's degree and a PhD. In addition, Israel is ranked among the 10 leading countries with patents issues per capita. After Taiwan, Israel is in number 2. And looking to NASDAQ and the number of companies that are actually in NASDAQ per capita, Israel is in place 3rd after the US and China. So maybe this is why the country is called also the startup nation, which is a synonymous of that describe more or less what it is done currently in the country. And most of the achievements that are currently achieved relies on the abilities of the workforce and the skills of the people, the scientific skills of the people that are involved in this industry. So what about the healthcare and medical device ecosystem in Israel? So if we are looking to the med science companies, so we can see that most of the industry comprise of medical device companies in number. So if we to be more specific, among the 4,000 registered companies that I mentioned before, 1,600 companies, there are medical device companies, which is quite a lot. We have that afterwards, we have the pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and finally the agriculture biotech. But most of the industry is the medical device industry. So what about the healthcare system in Israel? It works as follows. Every resident in Israel is insured by law, by the National Health Insurance Law. Every resident can choose one of the 4 health plans, also called HMOs, or health management organizations, regardless its age, pre-existing conditions, or state of health. The plan provides an identical basic basket of services, including visits of physicians, doctors, diagnostic and laboratory services, hospitalization, including birth and discounts on prescription medications. Israel has a technology advanced and the highest quality healthcare system. Hospitals and hospitals are equipped with modern facilities and high quality medical technology. One of the hospitals in Israel, the Sheba Center, is ranked already the 2nd year as the 3rd best hospital worldwide. Israel also is a leading country in medical tourism, which forces it also to be in the cutting edge technology in this field. So if we are looking in a report that was published by Bloomberg in September 2018, where healthcare organization or healthcare institutions were ranked based on their efficiency. So we can see that the Israeli healthcare system was ranked 6th worldwide, which is very high. It's after South Korea and Spain and Singapore and Hong Kong. So what are the regulatory requirements and market access? So there are actually three main roles that define the regulatory requirements and market access. First of all, the Ministry of Health of Israel is responsible for the regulation of medical devices in Israel. This is the main responsibility of the Ministry of Health. All companies, including importers that are willing to import medical equipment or devices to Israel, must be listed and registered within the Ministry of Health. That means that it is not possible to market a device that was not registered within the Ministry of Health. And also foreign manufacturers who are willing to export the devices into Israel shall appoint a local agent and distributor. And we will see afterwards what does it mean. You can see here, this is the link to the Ministry of Health website that you can find all the information there in both in Hebrew and in English. In 2012, in May 2012, a new Israeli medical device law was established, and the purpose of the law was actually to formalize the relationship between the healthcare authorities and the medical device industry, and we will see what this law provides. So according to this new law, devices that are manufactured or marketed in Israel must be registered by the Ministry of Health, as said before, under the AMAR, which is the Medical Device Division, under the Israeli Ministry of Health. So application for registration must be done only by an Israeli citizen or by a corporate entity that is established in Israel. Registration can be done by an independent body, also known as Israeli registration holder, that we will discuss about it later on, or by the manufacturer, distributor himself. The regulatory system fully accepts regulatory approvals from the US FDA and the EU CE mark, but also from Canada, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia, by providing evidence that the device was cleared, approved, or listed, meaning that as part of the application, we need to also provide the certificates that were granted by these authorities. The application shall be submitted to the Medical Device Division, the AMAR division, in Hebrew or in English. There is no classification system in Israel. Therefore, the classification of the device relies on the US FDA or EU CE. And if there is a dispute between or a difference in the classification between the FDA and the CE authorities, which sometimes it can happen. For example, in one authority, a device will be considered as a medical device, and in another authority, it may be not considered a medical device, or in one place, it would be a class 2, another place would be class 3. So basically, if there is a conflict, the FDA classification will be the one that will be considered finally. The instructions for the preparation of the registration and the list of required documentation are provided only in Hebrew, and this information can be found in this link, actually. Okay, so as we say, the application can be done also in English, but the instructions are only in Hebrew. So most probably you will need somebody that will be able to translate it into English. So, in terms of labeling and language requirements, so the instructions for use for home use products must be translated into Hebrew and Arabic, which are the two official languages in Israel. The user interface for home use product must be translated into Hebrew, and devices to be used in hospitals or clinic setting must have an interface and GUI, a graphic user interface, in English. Based upon the assumption that the staff, the medical staff or the technical staff that we use speaks English and understand English. Information of the registration holder must appear on the labels and the instructions for use. So if we are dealing with high-risk devices, meaning class 2B or above in the EU or class 2 or above in the US, in addition to the information that we are entitled or need to provide as part of the submission, we would also will be requested to provide a clinical evaluation summary or a clinical trial summary together with a risk management summary as part of the entire submission. In terms of timelines and cost, the review time frame is approximately 4 to 6 months. This is the time that is required for the authorities to provide the response. The current registration fee is relatively very low, is 102,000 Israeli shekels, which is about $350 US. And this amount is going to be canceled shortly, and actually that means that the application will be totally free of charge. Regarding change notification, the medical device division, the AMAR division, must be notified of any major changes, including changes in the indication for use or any fundamental technology, or registration that are associated with the FDA, CE, or ISO certificates, meaning if there is a change with the CE certificate or the FDA certificate or the ISO certificate, usually the 30,485 2016 certificate, then this should be notified to the Ministry of Health. Changes with impact to the FFF, the fit, form, and function of the device, and any significant change considered as such by the US FDA or the European Union notified body. In addition, any adverse event that occur in Israel or other countries where the same product is marketed shall be reported. So I mentioned before that the registration should be done by the local distributor or by the local manufacturer if we are talking about a device that was manufactured in Israel. But there is another option, which is the Israeli registration holder. So according to the new law, the submission to the medical device division can be done through a professional and skilled third party. The holder of the registration is responsible for liaison with the medical device division, and I will explain what it means as a skilled third party, skilled and professional third party. So what are the responsibilities of this Israeli registration holder? First of all, is to reside and maintain a place of business in Israel, to prepare and submit the registration for application, to review the first batch of devices to be marketed in Israel as requested by the AMAR division. And this is one of the reasons why the IRH needs to be professional, because to perform a first batch examination or inspection needs some sort of professionality. Liaison response to questions from the AMAR division concerning the registered products, a report of adverse events, renew registrations on time and maintain the market approval active, and deal with post-market surveillance and vigilance, which again needs some sort of high level of professionalism. Therefore, the IRH should be not just an address, not just a PO box, but it has to be somebody that understands the regulation, understand the law in Israel in general, and specifically regulatory affairs for medical devices. One of the main difference between the registration through a distributor or through an IRH is actually that the IRH, the Israeli registration holder, does not have any commercial interest with the device. The Israeli registration holder deals only with the registration matters without having any involvement in the economic or business side like the distributor has. So sometimes it is better to work with an independent body instead of working with somebody that has interest, because in the future, if you also want to switch between distributors, this may facilitate also the process if you are working with somebody that is not involved in the business side. So the Israeli registration order mechanism remains quite a lot the EAR, the European Authorized Representative, and the FDA US agent roles. The IRH, the registration holder, and the distributor that holds the registration is responsible and liable like it was the legal manufacturer, which again, it reminds very much the new role of the European Authorized Representative according to the current regulations, the MDR and the IVDR. And finally, I would like to talk about clinical trials in Israel. So if we are trying to characterize why to do clinical trials in Israel, I think that there are 7 main reasons to do it, and I will go back one by one. The first one is mutual recognition. Israel is a listed country according to the FDA section 202B1A of the Act, together with Australia, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, Switzerland, and South Africa, and any member nation of the European Union or the EEA. That means that studies that are performed in Israel are fully accepted by the FDA, by the Food and Drugs Administration in the US. And which is something that is very important, especially if you are willing to afterwards to apply for FDA clearance or approval. Secondly, accessibility. As we mentioned before, Israel is a very, very tiny country of only 550 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide. So it is very easy to access the sites. There are no internal flights. There are no time zones in the country. So it's very easy to access the sites, and it's very also easy to recruit subjects to participate in the studies. In terms of skills and high educated workforce, Israel is has one of the world's most skilled and educated workforces, with more doctors, physicians, scientists, and engineers per capita than any other nation. Population, the Israeli population is quite heterogeneous. The population originates from many countries and ethnicities. So if you want to cover the entire ethnicities or entire races, you will be able to find it in Israel. Also, all citizens in Israel, they carry an identity card, which sometimes is very important if you are dealing with minors and subjects that are unconscious. Efficient national health insurance program. Every resident of Israel is insured for healthcare under the National Health Institution Insurance Law or under one of the 4 HMOs. Every resident can choose one of the 4 health plans, regardless of the age, pre-existing conditions, or state of health. Infrastructure. Israel has very good and advanced technologically high-quality healthcare systems. Hospitals are equipped with modern facilities and high-quality medical technologies. Most of the medical policies in place in Israel are similar, sometimes also identical to those that are implemented in the US. In terms of attitude, well, also the medical staff, but subject, but also participants, they are very open for new developments. And Israel also is a leading country in medical tourism. So this is something also that it's a barometer for the willingness of participating studies. So if we look to a paper that was published in 2017 that actually mapped the number of studies, of clinical studies that are performed in different countries, including developed countries and developing countries. So we can see that if we are looking into Israel, in Israel there are in 2017, 5,591 studies. You can see, you can compare it to Sweden, to India, to Japan. So quite a lot of clinical activities are done in Israel, and this is mostly because of the reasons that I mentioned before. In terms of the law for performing clinical trials in Israel, there is a law that was published in 1980. It was revised in 2006 and actually incorporated the principles of the Declaration of Helsinki for performing clinical trials and the ISO 14155 for performing clinical trials with medical devices. So if the study do not conform with these regulations, so most probably that it will not be accepted, it will not be approved to be executed in Israel. The clinical study must be approved by both the Medical Institute Ethics Committee, the IEC, or the IRB, as is known in the US, or also known in Israel as the Helsinki Committee, and by the General Director of the Minister of Health or his authorization, as we will see afterwards. Only a licensed physician or licensed dentist in Israel, dependent on subject of the trial, can act as the principal investigator and must submit a request for the clinical study approval to the IEC or IRB. The clinical investigation plan, the CAP protocol, is one of the components of the submission, together with the investigator's brochure. The informed consent form that should be, that in this case, it is necessary to use the template that is provided by the Ministry of Health and should be translated to, in addition to Hebrew, to English, Arabic, Russian, Amharic as needed. The labeling should be also included, and also a reporting approval that the study was logged into the US National Institute of Health, NIH, and currently there is also in Israel a database, a relatively new database that the information shall be logged also into this database. And of course, the application forms. The ethics committee in this case reviewed the submission and defined if the submission is appropriate and the study can be considered to be a special study. A special clinical study is one was final approval is under the authorization of the medical institution director, and it reminds a little bit the process in the US where you have the significant risk device and the non-significant risk device. So in Israel we call it special and non-special device, and we will see what does it mean. So special clinical trials shall meet the following criteria. It shall comply with all the relevant safety standards applicable to a device for the same type. In this case, we refer to the fact that medical device shall satisfy to any of the following criteria. It should be found in a routine medical use. It should be approved for marketing by the US FDA. And sold in the US. It's not enough that is approved, it should be also sold or it should be also approved by the EU authorities, meaning it has CE mark and also sold in this region. It has to have previous safety clinical trials completed in recognized countries, and the recognized countries are those countries that I mentioned before, which includes the US FDA, the European Union member states, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia. And the results should be reported in investigators' brochure. The study involved a method of use applied in previous trials, and the study does not involve a special population. And in this case, special population mean pregnant women, minors under the age of 18, or patients whose judgment have been impaired by the physical or mental condition. So non-special clinical trials, this is a clinical trials that require the approval by the Minister of Health in addition to the IEC or the IRB. The last two slides just show the process. The process is that the sponsor is in contact with the investigator, appoints the principal investigator, who prepares the submission file to the ethics committee. The ethics committee approve or do not approve the study. If he does not approve the study, he send it back to the investigator. If it is approved, then the question is, the next question is if this is a special study or not a special study. If this is a special study, this is under the responsibility and authority of the director of the hospital to approve it. But if this is not a special study, then it needs to go also to the Ministry of Health for additional review and decision. In terms of timeline, so if it is a special study, usually the local ethics committee takes 2 to 3 weeks to review and make a decision about the study, and additional 2 weeks for the hospital's director to finally approve the study. For non-special studies, then we have also the Ministry of Health in between. In this case, this will take 4 to 12 weeks, also for the Ministry of Health to review the study and to approve it. This is all. These are my contact details. As I mentioned before, you are most welcome to contact me for any question that you might have. I hope that you find the presentation important and provide you some additional information that you might probably have. If you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adi. So we do have some questions in the Q&A. First one is, I have a question regarding exempt devices such as custom-made devices in Israel. Those devices are supposedly exempt from registration requirements and only require an importation license through a distributor. Can this Israeli distributor be located in Palestine?
Yes. Well, first of all, let's start with the second part. Everything that is referred to Palestine, so the Palestinian health authorities, they work closely with the Israeli health authorities. So any component or any medical device that arrives to the Palestinian authorities, they come through the Israeli Ministry of Health, and there is a mutual committee between the Palestinian Ministry of Organization and the Israeli organization that together they approve or not approve the device. Regarding custom-made devices, they are treated more or less like they are treated in the EU. For example, in the EU, you don't need CE mark for custom-made devices. This is the same in Israel. You need to register your device within the Ministry of Health, but in this case, the registration, it will be just a formal process because you cannot provide any certificate that proves that the device complies with any legislation.
All right, we've got a couple more. So second one here is, for the professional use of the GUI must be in English. I assume the IFU/labels can also be in English. Is that correct?
Well, it depends. If the product or the device is targeted to be used at home, it should be also in Hebrew and in Arabic. But if the product is going to be used only by medical staff, it could be only in English.
Awesome. Another question is, what is the definition of a medical device in Israel?
Good question. The definition of the medical device is included in the law, in the new Israeli law for medical devices. The definition is very much close to the definition of the FDA. You can find the definition there. You can also see a translation of the law into English, so you can find also the definition in English.
Okay. And the second part of that question is, can it be assumed that a product does not qualify as a medical device in Europe, also not require registration in Israel?
Well, this is a good point. As I said, if there is a dispute between two authorities, for example, the European Union and the US FDA, so the Ministry of Health will take the approach of the FDA. Now, if the device was not clear or approved in the US, that means that there is no FDA clearance or approval, and it is not considered to be a medical device in Europe, so most probably that it won't be also considered to be a medical device in Israel. But in this case, it depends on how you ship the device into Israel and what would be the code, the shipping code that your broker will have to write on the shipping slip, because this will dictate if it will arrive to the Ministry of Health or not.
And then another question is, does the Ministry of Health ever audit companies in other countries, for instance, the US?
Well, in principle, they have the possibility to do it. I don't remember to see that it happens once. In my career, I didn't experience such a situation. So formally, yes, practically, no.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? That's all the questions in the Q&A. You can either put questions in the Q&A or the chat. We'll see them in both places. All right, I got a question. Is Israel likely to join the Mdsap jurisdiction?
Well, this is not something that is discussed currently. As we all know, Mdsap currently is enforced only by the Canadian authorities. I don't see currently any intention of Israel to join the Mdsap agreement.
These are awesome questions, guys. All right. There's no more questions. We'll close for today. So thank you for joining us. The next session will be starting shortly. We'll be hearing from a panel about what you don't know about Central and South America regulations. So you can join us at the top of the hour. Thank you.